everybody, this is Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. And if you want to get your money's worth, stay right here because you're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts. And remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
This is Don West here, and I'm telling you, Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! Make sure that's the one you check out, because, buddy, like me, they're the real deal, baby!
This is Jake the Snake Roberts. Just letting you know, you need to listen to Knockouts and 3 Counts, or you'll see that damn snake again.
This is the Ring of Honor World Television Champion, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy. And you're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
What up, though, everybody? This is Kyle, and you are listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts. As usual, we got Dev on the line, and we've got a special guest with us tonight. So before we get to him, Dev, you want to throw out your social media real quick?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Devin63. It's DEVINTHE 63. You can find me on Instagram at Allstate No Sizzle. That's one word. Hey, make sure you check out the Reality Era News page on Facebook. And eventually, once my schedule, clears out, I'm going to make an announcement of when I'm going to start doing my 1205 lives again. But we'll see. But stay tuned.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Detroit Knockout, at Detroit NOKOUT. Make sure you're following the show at KO3C Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and at KO3CPod.com. Without further ado, we've got a guest in studio with us who, hell, I've known for the better part of, 10, 12 years. We've got David Garmo with us. How you doing, brother, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Let everybody know where they can find you and all that good stuff.
You can find me on Instagram at GarmoFlow, AJJ, and at Assembly Jiu Jitsu.
So part of the reason we're bringing you on, we talked a little bit about Modern Flow, and first of all, let's start with that. Tell me a little bit about how Modern Flow came to be, what spurned it, and now how it's turned into all these jiu-jitsu tournaments, which have been pretty successful.
Yeah, Modern Flow started, I want to say June of 2012, and it was because I was broke and I didn't want to get a job. So
the honesty, I love it.
Yeah, so me and my really good friend Saif Askar, who used to train jiu-jitsu.
I love Saif. I used to work with his wife too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, he was in medical school at the time, and he took out a little extra on his student loans to get us started, and that's how Modern Flow kind of started. Yeah.
I've got a few of those rash guards still at the house, man. Those chest pieces, bro.
Yeah, they last a long time.
So that's how you guys got started with Modern Flow. How did it, turn into what it is now to where you're doing all these tournaments and stuff?
Well, I was training at Detroit Jiu Jitsu in 2014, and Danny Edgemy used to run the Detroit BJJ Open. So all the heads of their school, the big heads of the schools, they all ran a tournament, right? So like Kaiki had the Michigan Open. Hibero had the Toledo Open, or Blanky had the Toledo Open, and Dion had the Buckeye Open, right? So Danny had his, right, and then he started doing it, and I think he did it a couple of years as the Detroit BJJ Open, but the guy's so busy, he's doing a million different things. So when I was training over there, he had actually became a partner of mine in Modern Flow, and I suggested to him that he let me run it and see what I can make of it. And I do all the work, and then we figure out the deal that way. And, try to, I have all these ideas. At that point, I competed so much, traveled all over, competing, training, learning all that stuff, that I'm like, I think I can make some of this stuff happen that's happening everywhere else over here. Cash prizes for divisions, all that type of stuff. And he was like, all right, let's run it. So we started doing it that way. We did our first Modern Flow tournament, which is an open tournament, October or November of 2014, and then after that we did it twice a year, pretty much like clockwork until now.
So you mentioned a little bit about training and competing all over the world. I know you were over in Japan, wasn't it, for a little while? Yeah, with Carp Diem or something like that.
Yeah, so I went on vacation to Japan one time, and then I decided I wanted to move there, pretty much like 3 days in. And And I came back home and I decided, I came back home, bought my ticket to go back. I stayed for 3 months at a time each time I went. So when I was out there, I was training at Carpe Diem, which is like the big affiliation out there in Japan, and now just spreading all over Asia. So I've competed in a bunch of different countries now.
So what were the biggest differences you saw in Carpe Diem and the stuff over in Japan as opposed to what we're used to either learning or what you see just in the jiu-jitsu game in America?
As far as like the technique in the games are concerned, the guys are a lot smaller. I was a big guy over there, and I'm 5'6", 175 pounds. Everybody's smaller, and everybody's in, I don't want to say better shape, like stronger shape, but everybody's a little bit thinner. Everybody's like, the 40-year-olds over there move really well. But they can move and they're flexible and all that stuff. Like, you see a 45-year-old over here, he's usually going to be pretty stiff, but he's going to be strong. He's going to have that old man strength. Over there, it's not really the case. They play berimbolo a lot. They play a small man's game because they're small guys. So the technique is a little bit different. They use different techniques.
So, now with your game being what it is at this point, you've said that you've not only trained but competed everywhere. Let everybody know, we're letting them know about the On It Invitational, which I watched because one of my friends actually works at that gym.
Oh, yeah?
So, I was telling her when that was going down. And now, like I said, Devin's over there in Texas now as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let everybody know a little bit of a background on, you've competed everywhere. I mean, you've competed in what, London, Japan. I mean,
yeah, South Korea, London, Japan, South Korea, obviously everywhere in the United States, Canada. That's pretty much it, but I think that's where a lot of jiu-jitsu is. Eventually I'll compete in, other countries in Europe, probably Italy, France, Portugal, at some point, but the biggest events are really, they're all here in the US, California, New York,
sure,
these different places. So, outside of going to those other countries, kind of just for my own fun, really the best competitions in America right now, with the exception of Brazil as well, right? And I haven't really had an interest in going over there yet.
Dev, you got any questions?
Yeah, I kind of got more of a general question. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, since the UFC became a thing, has become very, very popular. But originally, it was thought of as like, what are these dudes doing? And they're, laying on the ground and stuff like that. So for someone that has never really watched Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or is looking for a martial art to get into, why is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu a good base for MMA or just for everyday life for people that don't know anything about it?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is great because you can make it as hard or as easy as you want and still learn the techniques and still be pretty confident in what you can do. In a lot of these stand-up martial arts, if you're not consistently sparring, you don't really know if your stuff works, right? If you're not sparring with other guys that are willing to hit you and, you get hit back or, you hit them back, you don't really know. And it's hard to do that when you're a 45-year-old guy who's working 6 days a week and you got a family at home. But when you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you can come to the gym a couple days a week, learn technique, do some sparring all the time. You can do that for years and years and years, and you're not going to scramble your brain. And that's the thing that I like about it. Originally I wanted to do MMA. That was why I started jiu-jitsu.
We're going to get into that for sure.
So like that was my thing. I wanted to do MMA. I thought I was going to be a UFC champion, right? Whatever weight class it was going to be, 155 pounds or whatever.
Because you wrestled at, wasn't it Brother Rice or something?
Yeah, I wrestled at Brother Rice. I wasn't very good back then, but I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because that's a good thing. And then I started doing MMA and mixed, Muay Thai and boxing and all that stuff. And I just realized, you know what? I don't want to get hit in the head, man.
So let's talk about that. So story time, Devin. You've heard me talk about it. Well, now you've got the guy whose fight I was actually there to see. So you only had what? What were you going to say?
Ring the bell.
All right, I already rang it. Anyways, so what that's for is anytime somebody was there, they got to ring the bell, which Devin's getting increasingly more bells. So, yeah, I was there, but you only had the one MMA fight, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we need to talk about that night because I distinctly remember I was sitting at the judges' table, and I remember a dude getting his shit splattered so bad that his blood splattered all over the fucking printer in front of me. And the guy tried to stay after the fight to fight Darren because he was the ref.
Right.
And Darren disqualified him after he hit him in the nuts like 5 times. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The guy was clearly winning the fight. But, I mean, dude, he hit him in the nuts so many times that it eventually got to the point where it's like how do you not disqualify this guy?
100%.
And my question to you is, what the fuck were your thoughts when that place went nuts and they started throwing beer from the balcony and Flynn jumped in the cage talking about, if y'all don't chill the fuck out, we're going to shut the whole thing down? Because mind you, Devin, this was all on Channel 20.
So this is going to be you're not going to like my answer here. So that was my first fight. So I fought fairly early on in the night. I was, I don't know, fight number 5 or 6.
Right.
I left.
Oh, damn it!
I was gone. I'd been to enough of those shows to know that they were just going to be a total shit show. That I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to Windsor because I was only 19 at the time. It was 2009.
Okay. Yep.
I went to Windsor. I don't know. I might have gambled a little bit. I might have drank a little bit. But I as soon as I got done fighting, and I think we had one more guy fought right after. I think Shea Butler fought right after.
Shea fought. Yep.
Yeah, I think he was literally either the next fight.
Yeah,
or the fight
he was
right
within
after
a couple fights of it because I know you fought early in the card, and then the funny thing is the guy you fought ended up training with us later on.
Right. Yeah, but he didn't. He stopped though, right? He trained somewhere else.
He trained actually another place I trained. He ended up training with Russ Tackett and then with Scarred and shit.
That was where he was training when
you guys
him.
fought him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was one of those. I knew he trained with Russ at some point.
Well, I know he trained also at Vision with Tyrone.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know where he's been training since.
Right.
Or
I
still
don't
training
know shit about him at this point. But
yeah,
that night was wild, Devin. To kind of paint the scene for you guys, obviously, since you guys weren't there, I'll ring the bell again before you say it. Anyways, so Garmo fought, and then shortly thereafter, when the guy who had, like I said, kicked old boy in the nuts a few times, the crowd went nuts when they disqualified him. Like, when I say nuts, bro, it was damn near a fucking riot because they were throwing beer from the balcony. I got hit with a beer. Miles got hit with a beer. And the Miles I'm talking about is, yes, past guest of the show, Miles Jury, who just fought Ben Henderson in Bellator. That tells you how long we've known each other. So I'll never forget it because, dude, they just went nuts. And I've never in my life before or since saw a promoter get in the cage and have to tell everybody to chill the fuck out, because if not, he was going to shut the fights down. But that was back in the XCC days where that happened all the time.
Back when there was 35 fights on a card and the show went on until 4 a.m.
And my all-time favorite fighting style happened to come up time and time over again. I'm a street fighting specialist.
Oh, yeah. There was a guy back then who had the best nickname ever. And I always thought it was the best nickname ever.
The Energizer Bunny?
No. Who was that? Oh,
the guy that always used to wear Chucky Matey. The guy always used to wear fucking bunny ears to the ring.
No, I don't remember that guy. I'm talking about this. He was a heavyweight. They called him the Mexicutioner.
Yeah, that's the guy Don fought. That's the guy that broke his nose.
No,
it was Ray Lopez.
That wasn't the same guy, was it?
I swear to God it was.
Are you sure?
I'm almost 100% sure. I can't swear my life to it, but I'm almost sure it was him.
Okay, all right. Well, no, maybe.
Because his name was Ray Lopez.
Yeah, it could be a few. You're probably right, but I always loved that.
And I only remembered it because when Don and him fought, it was for XCC. And if you have never seen it, go back and try to find it, because that was also on Channel 22. Miles had fought on that card and fought a complete turd can. I'll say that now, because the guy he was supposed to fight didn't show up, and he broke his foot on the guy's face.
Who was he supposed to fight?
I don't remember who it was, but he ended up fighting David Herline, who ended up fighting. He fought Harley Wallen later on. Like, he just became the guy that would take any fight, and then guys would just beat him up.
Right.
But he's the only guy I've ever seen in an MMA fight. The guy grabbed a hold of Miles and pulled Miles into mount on top of him. Miles stood up out of mount, which I've never seen somebody do in a fight. As he stands up, he fucking cracks the guy. He falls against the fence and then hits him with about the nastiest head kick I think I've ever been there live to see, because he hit him with the foot, which you're not supposed to, but he hit him so hard he broke his foot on the guy's face and then proceeded to just mongoose punch this motherfucker 100 times.
That was a rough night for a bunch of our guys. I mean, Don won his fight against Ray Lopez.
Yeah, and his fucking nose was on the other side of his face, and he broke his hand on his head.
Yeah, that's right. He broke his hand.
He broke his hand and broke his nose.
His hand still doesn't close, I think.
No, it's still fucked up. To this day, it's still fucked up.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So now that we're talking about the old days, tell me how Assembly Jiu-Jitsu became to be.
Well, I mean, ever since I started jiu-jitsu, I told myself that, this is what it was almost like after my first class. I'm like, oh, I love this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this forever. I'm going to teach jiu-jitsu. I'm going to compete as long as I can. I'm going to do as good as I can. I'm going to be one of the best in the world. Those are my goals. But part of that was I'm going to make this my career, right? And there's not, you can't really make that much money competing with the exception of guys like Gordon Ryan and whatever. But, even then, those are not sustainable things for like your whole career. But so I told myself I'm going to open up a school, but I told myself I wouldn't do it until I was a black belt. I didn't want to be
one of those turds that there's a million of.
Yeah, it's just my thing is like I want to do all the things that I want to do competitive wise,
right?
Like being a competitor, right? And I was all white, blue, purple, brown. Those are all just getting ready for black belt,
right?
At the end of the day, right? So. If I open up a school when I was a brown belt or a purple belt, which I thought about doing, don't get me wrong, it's not like I never considered it, but I just wouldn't be able to do some of those things, or I wouldn't be able to do them as efficiently as I would have liked to. So I was in Japan. I told myself I want to live here forever, but I couldn't really make a good living there. Jiu-jitsu in Japan is slightly cheaper than it is in the States, and
cheaper is in payoffs or like
just like like memberships don't cost as much.
That's a good thing.
Huh?
That's a good thing because membership in America, I can't tell you how many people over the years have come to me and been like, "Bro, I want to train jiu-jitsu, but I can't pay $100 a month."
Well, to me though, that's like $100 a month. That's $25 a week.
I agree.
It's the when people say that stuff, it is the silliest thing ever.
It's a cop out.
It's a cop out. You spend so much more money on all these. Listen, right now, especially in the day and age of the iPhone 11, you know what I mean? They're spending more money a week on
lease payments.
Not even lease payment. The what is it? Download the pay to play stuff.
Okay,
you know what I mean? Like I have this game. It's called Archero. I've spent so much money on this game for no reason. It's a terrible
like Clash
game.
of Clans and
like
all that
Clash
shit.
of Clans,
yes.
stuff like that. So all of that is just nonsense. Drinks at the bar in Detroit cost $16 now. You're gonna tell me you can't afford a $100 membership at a gym? That's nonsense. But over there, everything was cheaper. Everything was cheaper, and even the nicest gym the nicest gym, which was one of the Carpe Diem branches in this area called Hiro. It's where all the embassies are at. It's like the Lower East Side of New York, where all the the millionaires and billionaires are at, right?
Mm-hmm.
The membership is $190 a month. That's nothing. It should be $500 a month because everybody's so wealthy. But because they have this judo background where judo is free over there, everything is cheap. So I couldn't really make a good living out there, and it would be very difficult because I don't speak Japanese and I'd have to get all these lawyers and all this whole deal. So I'm like, I can't make enough money out here just teaching jiu-jitsu and running Modern Flow. So I'm like, I'm gonna go back home and I'm gonna build the baddest facility that Michigan has ever seen. The nicest place, the best instruction, all these things, offer all these like a grappling haven, in Michigan. And that's what we did.
So now that you've got that going, I mean, so when I started jiu-jitsu, it was probably around the same time you did, or maybe just a little bit before then, because I started over at MASH, probably in like 2006, like right after they opened. So I don't know.
They opened in March of 2008. I started it October 11th.
Okay.
I got these dates all written.
Yeah.
That's why I know.
Well, yeah, I ask because, so like you said, you can't, it's hard to make a living over in Japan doing jiu-jitsu. Like, how would you say in the time that you've trained, have you seen the game change to where it's actually like a plausible thing to where you could actually make a living off of jiu-jitsu? Because I mean, every time I look on social media, bro, you're competing somewhere, even though, I mean, it's probably ramped down a little bit now because you got assembly and all that stuff. But I mean, like, what does that look like for you as far as, to where that became what you were doing?
Ask me the question one more time.
So, I mean, how does, like you said, you were able to make a living off of competing in jiu-jitsu and the things that are affiliated,
right.
What does that look like? And it wasn't like that when we first started. Like, you couldn't have there's no way you could have survived off of that shit.
Well, okay, so it was a couple of things. There's always been money in jiu-jitsu. Don't let anybody tell you any differently, because they're absolutely full of shit. There's always been money there. It's just a matter of how do you get that money? How do you figure out how to get money that's in the jiu-jitsu ether into your own pocket, right? All these instructors will tell you that there's no money in jiu-jitsu. They're full of shit. Don't let them fool you. They're just telling you that so that you don't feel as bad, when you pay for things. And that's okay. It's okay to make money doing jiu-jitsu. Like, you've been training since 2008.
Yeah.
This is something that's been awesome for your life, right?
I wouldn't argue that at all.
And yeah, I don't think many people would. So somebody should make something off of that, especially the people that helped you get to that point, whatever. But there's money there. So when me and Save started Modern Flow, we did this, we built it up, and, it was never like a $1 million business or anything like that. But I was 23 years old, 24 years old. I had very few bills. I had I drove a Toyota Corolla. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't spend money on anything but jiu-jitsu, right?
Hey, do you want some of my bills?
I will absolutely take none of them. Because now I have bills, and they
well,
suck.
the bill that we need to run up is the bill that will bring us Drunk Randy. For those of you that listen to the show, you know all about Drunk Randy, so we need to run the tab up real quick. Devin, do you agree?
I definitely agree. I always love Drunk Randy.
Go ahead.
I gotta meet this guy.
I mean, we could always go down the street to Selena's when this bitch is over. All right, let me digress.
Yeah. So, I didn't have any bills. I wasn't married. I have no kids. You know what I mean? I lived with my parents until, I don't know, I think I was 25, which is normal in the Chaldean community. Don't look down on me, guys.
Dude, I'm 27 and still live with my mom right now.
It's all right. It's all good, right? But, I just didn't have that many bills. I could live off of fairly little and just take all that money that I would, that other people would spend at the bar and buy a plane ticket to California to compete at the Nogi Worlds or go to New York for, the New York Open or something like that. So that's how I did it. And now, now I make a little bit more money, nothing outrageous, but, my money goes into travel and really good food. Those are the two things.
And really good food.
Yeah, I like to travel, compete, travel, and, experience the best food that this earth has to offer, But,
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good pastime to me. Dev, you got any questions?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to the old days of MMA, man. I hear Kyle talk about this all the time. I kind of got into MMA a little bit later, especially on the local scene. So I want to hear from you. Like, what was early day MMA like in Michigan?
The Wild West.
I mean, that's the best way to fucking describe it. When you got guys that are coming into the cage saying, I'm a street fighting specialist, and they come in with their $20 and one shorts that they bought from Dick's probably the day before, and they're having to tie tape around their shorts so their fucking shorts don't fall off their ass in the cage.
I was just gonna say that. You knew shit was on it was on a downturn when a guy would show up with a belly over the taped shorts around his waist. It was really weird. It was, promoters were paying guys under the table to take fights, and you'd get this guy who looked like he knew what he was doing. Like, he was in really, he was in pretty damn good shape. He had a six-pack, and he's out there, and he's got tattoos, and he's, he shaved a mohawk into his head. And then all of a sudden, the guy that he's fighting is this literal turd. You look at him, and you're like, I have no other words to describe this guy but a turd. And who set that matchup up? It didn't make any sense, but that's just the way they did things back then. Because that guy who was kind of in shape brought 100 of his buddies to come watch the fight.
Of course.
And he had to win.
And that's all they cared about back in the day. Dude, I'll never forget, and I go back to it because we mentioned it and referenced it. So that night that fight happened where Miles and Don fought, it was at Royal Oak Music Theater on one card. And if this gives you an idea of the talent that was around back then, on one card you had Darren Cruikshank fought on that card. You had Justin James, who trains out at Extreme Couture now. You had Don, who's fought everywhere. You had Miles, who's fought in the UFC and Bellator, with James Lee and Jeremy Stevens and all them in their corner. And then you look at some of the matchups that happened on that card. Now, Don had a legitimate matchup because Ray Lopez is just tough.
But he was tough, and he was young, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And he would fight anybody. He was one of those guys you would see him pop up at King of the Cage. You would see him pop up at XCC. Obviously, for those that don't know, XCC and King of the Cage are kind of linked because Flynn owned both. But that being said, I mean, you would see these matchups, and the guy I always go back to is David Herline because I'll never forget that night. Like, I'm walking around, I got Miles' shirt on, and this guy's like, "Yeah, I'm fighting this fucking guy, Miles Jury, and I'm just gonna fuck him up." And I am laughing in my head because I'm thinking, "Kid, you don't know what you just signed up for." And 5 minutes later, all you get is, "Oh shit." I hear him talking to his friends. "Oh shit, he hits hard." Like, dude, you would just see the most fucked up. Dev, I wish you were into MMA back then because it made for pure fucking comedy. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but it really, when he says the Wild West, I don't know how else to put it because almost every time you would go to a fight, there was one of two things. Either you'd have some complete bum against a guy who was actually halfway decent, or you would have where the crowd would get so drunk and rowdy that it would be damn near a riot.
Yeah. There were two guys, and I'm not going to name them because, I know you definitely know who they are. There were two guys they never fought each other because they weren't in the same weight class, but there were two guys, I've trained with both of them, but they would bring such a crowd to these fights. They literally sell 120 tickets.
I feel like I know who we're talking about.
100% you do. There's no way that you don't. I mean, like, every promoter would love to have these guys on their card because they would bring everybody. Everybody. I don't even know how they know this many people in real life. How do they get these tickets to them? But they'd come out there and one of them fought a little bit more, was a little bit more experienced, and they gave him some pretty good fights and sometimes some tomato cans or whatever, depending on if the guy dropped out. The other guy, he was kind of new, but he was selling all these tickets, so hey, let's get him in here. Let's milk this for all we can get. And it was just hilarious because they would go hard. The families would go hard,
and it would always be a fight between the two families, bro. It happened
100%.
all the time. Like, Dev,
Yeah.
I swear, if I could paint you a visual picture by what we're saying, I'm telling you, I used to be at fights almost every other weekend just because you never knew what was going to happen, and it always made for good entertainment.
Yeah, it definitely did. After the first couple of years of me training, at MASH and all that stuff, and all the guys fighting from there, I had to stop going to these shows because they were just too much for me. I just couldn't handle all of the aggression, anymore. It was just, they were so charged. I mean, you'd be exhausted after you left one of these shows.
Oh yeah, because you never knew what was going to pop off.
Oh yeah, how many put them in a body bag chants did you hear? You know what I mean?
Or the most racist ass shit that would get screamed into the cage. Or how about every time Adrian fights, how the one time Adrian actually lost, I thought we were all going to die. Like Fabio was...
This is Adrian
Hodgebej.
Yeah.
And the one time he lost, bro, I'm not kidding. Joe Battaglia, who is also a friend of the show, and we've done live stuff from TXC fights, I'll never forget all of those people, started to move in on the cage, and and I'm like, I got a security shirt on, which the only reason I did security, it was just an excuse to get into the fight.
Right.
And bro, it just was like, dude, what the fuck? If he loses, this place might riot.
Albanians are fiery people, man. You got to be careful with that.
And that's no disrespect to them at all, but I'm just saying.
They know what they are.
They know what it is. If you look, bro, the only thing I can equate this to so that you can understand what I'm talking about, it was like they were a bunch of Bloods, bro. They all had the Albanian flag, which is a red flag with a black eagle on it, and they all had their flags waving and all that shit. Dude, it's wild.
So, Kyle, remember we did a show with, I think both brothers fought on.
Oh, we did, because they came on the show. They're one of Randy's favorite guests.
Adrian's got a brother?
Yeah, Ermal is here.
I'll say this, man. I have never seen anything like that in my life. And I'm kind of jealous because I would love to see, a bunch of black people show up for a fight and show that much support for, a fighter like that. Which it kind of did at that same card because they had someone who represented one of the fraternities. But yeah, that support from the Albanians, man, I want to research Albanian culture now. I was thoroughly impressed by what I saw from them.
So before we go any further, shout out to our sponsor, Matt Stransky, who's watching the video right now. If you're looking to buy a house, man, Stransky & Company is the way to go. Stransky & Company is a top-producing real estate team that specializes in individual strategy, over-the-top service, and continued success for their clients. They're the real estate easy button. If you're looking to buy, sell, invest, call them at 248-563-9449 or email them at admin@stranskycompany.com. Follow them on all their social medias at Stransky & Company. And, hey, go to our website at ko3cpod.com. You can find all of their links there. Like I said, it's not just because they're our sponsors, man. All you got to do is go and look at their Facebook page or any of their social media and look at the houses they're putting out. Buy a fucking house, people. Hot damn it.
Buy a house.
Hey, if Stransky's watching right now, man, I want him to put in the chat like whether that house in Berkeley is still for sale, man. That house is fucking beautiful, man.
I bought it. Sorry, Dev.
So let's get back to business. So we talked a little bit about how you got Modern Flow Pro 2 coming. Tell everybody what they can expect in the difference maybe in Modern Flow Pro versus your regular, like a Michigan Open, a Buckeye Border Battle, like all these things you're talking about.
Right.
Let people know what they can expect, where it's going to be, what they got to look forward to.
So the Modern Flow Pro 2 is going to be a grappling showcase. Okay, so this is not going to be an open tournament like these Michigan Open or the Buckeye or anything like that. This is where you sign up and you fight in your division and all that stuff. This is going to be a show for the local community, featuring a bunch of the grapplers and all that stuff. What do we got over here?
One of your homies is talking about your trip to Canada.
That's right. We did go to Canada. Oh, what up, E-Block? He was just in class today, actually. So the Modern Flow Pro 2, it's a grappling showcase. We're trying to get guys, like a bunch of the instructors at all of the schools all around, Metro Detroit area are going to be competing. Who
are some of the names you guys got in there that people in Michigan will know?
So like these are already published, so I'm not giving up anything too important here, but like I have guys like Jason Kazmarek from New Way. He's the owner of New Way Martial Arts. Bill Conkle, who owns Voyage Martial Arts. Mateus Veloso from Allegiance. Vic Torres, Cascal, Victorious MMA. Matt Linsmer from Magic BJJ. And then I'm trying to match up guys like Danny Adjemi, obviously from Detroit Jiu Jitsu, Anthony Fawaz from Detroit Jiu Jitsu. We had some matchup issues, injuries happened, so we're trying to link them up with different guys. But those are just the black belts, right? We have a bunch of purple belts, some brown belts, a bunch of blue belts that are going to be competing as well. Trying to make exciting matchups because we want to just, Michigan. And especially Lower Michigan has some really good jiu-jitsu, and nobody respects it outside of Michigan. Really, it's like there's a few guys that get a little bit of recognition, but this area is really good at grappling, and people don't.
There's
see
no
it.
argument there.
But the thing is, nobody else sees it, right? And
that's because Michigan's. It's the same with MMA, man. It's like look at it in the last year. You've had 5 guys have gotten signed to the UFC. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've had Darren that's fought in Ryzen, UFC, all that stuff. You've got Miles who's fought in UFC, Bellator. Chaos just went and fought over in China. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's guys that are getting out there and doing it, but Michigan's never been known as a hotbed.
Right. It's true, but we have a really incredible wrestling tradition here, right? So it works really well for submission grappling as well. A lot of those guys who are high-level wrestlers are coming into jiu-jitsu now, especially now that jiu-jitsu is spreading. There's so many schools now. Like 10 years ago when we started, 12 years ago when we started jiu-jitsu, how many schools were there? How many schools did you know of outside of MASH?
Well, put it this way. The reason I ended up, full disclosure, the reason I ended up at MASH was because the gym I was training at was quite frankly a little hole in the wall.
Right.
And I was training to get ready I was still competing in boxing at the time. And so my mom, I was probably, look at Brandon. Shout out to one of our coaches from back in the day for Garmo and the guy I still train with from time to time, Brandon Fracassi McDaniel. How you doing, brother, man? Yeah, man, like when I started.
How do I see this?
You can see who's looking at it in the live feed.
I got you.
But yeah, man, like I was still competing in boxing. You got to turn your volume down, dog.
Sorry,
look at Garmo.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Listen to me.
Yeah, but yeah, dude, when I started, the only gyms that were really around, MASH was like the first big MMA gym that there was. And I was training at a small gym, which, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into it. But, yeah, we were training there. My mom was like, look, if I'm paying for you to train, I'm going to take you to somewhere where I know I'm going to get the money's worth. And MASH was like that first big super gym. Like when it started, I mean, you had James Lee, who, has fought in UFC. He's fought in Pride.
Right.
He knocked out Travis View in Pride. He fought Alessio Sakara in the UFC. He's supposed to fight Tim Bosch in the UFC. You had Todd, who was still, fighting King of the Cage. You had Don, who had fought in Russia and all those places.
Right.
I mean, and then you had all the guys that were on the come up. Like I said, you had a Darren Cruikshank. You had Justin James. You had Eric Moon. You had, literally a who's who of what it was. But there wasn't like it is now where there's a Michigan top team. There's MASH. There's Fuse MMA. There's Murcielago MMA. There wasn't – at least if they were around, they weren't what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't as pronounced maybe.
They weren't as evolved.
Right.
Now – with the proliferation of jiu-jitsu in this area, right? A bunch of guys have come out of Warrior Way, MASH, Detroit Jiu-Jitsu, and all these other local schools, right? And then what are they doing? They're opening their own schools. They get their black belts or they get higher up. They live in an area that's a little bit far away from where they're training. And all of a sudden,
Dursa. What's up, Dursa?
Oh, we want it now.
Shit, meatloaf sounds good, dog. I'm hungry right now.
Right. But it's compounding on itself, and so now there's so many schools that you can't do the same old thing now. Everybody's got to evolve. Everybody's been evolving, right? Everybody's getting better. The schools are getting nicer. The class structure is changing up a little bit. Things are getting better across the board because now you have a lot more competition.
Well,
right?
that was one thing I was going to point out. Dude, when we started, there wasn't really a such thing as, like, competition classes per se. Like, it was either you had, like, your pro MMA fighters, and then you just kind of had the rest of the classes. Now you've got, you walk into any place. Perfect example. I got to go train at American Top Team when I was in Florida, right? Now, granted, I forgot my belt, so they didn't realize that I really wasn't a white belt until we started to roll, and they started to put two and two together.
Sure.
But so I went out there, and, like, instantly it's like you train here, like it, like the classes were all segmented to where now it's like you've got a beginner's class at 6 o'clock, you've got an intermediate here, you've got a competition class, that there wasn't all that stuff. And not to mention, I think the rise of jiu-jitsu as a whole is totally different from when we started. Like, so many more people, maybe because of the rise of the UFC, are, so much more aware of jiu-jitsu, I think, than they were then. My question to you is, I've got my own thoughts, which I'll give after I ask you, but what do you think the benefits are of jiu-jitsu as opposed to, everybody thinks of, when you think of self-defense, most people think of boxing or MMA or something in that realm. Can you give your own personal opinion, being a black belt, what do you think the advantages are of jiu-jitsu as opposed to some of these other self-defense or martial arts?
Okay, so there are many, but I think probably the most important one is, it's relative, but in my opinion, the most important one is it's fun. You can really enjoy jiu-jitsu and not necessarily get your head pounded in like in boxing.
Sure.
That's not to say that boxing isn't fun or MMA isn't fun. It is. Absolutely it is. But jiu-jitsu is more fun to more people than MMA or boxing is in practice.
Sure.
Right? The doing of it, right? If you hate something, you're not going to do it. I don't care how amazing it is. Like, I know lifting weights is good for me. I know it is. Like, there's nobody's going to convince me that it's not, right? I hate it. I can't stand it. I won't do it. I barely ever do it, right? So on the same side of that, it's like if lifting weights was really fun, or some version of lifting weights is really fun, that's the best one for me, right? Because I would consistently do it, right? Jiu-jitsu is really fun because you'll consistently do something that you really enjoy. And if you hate something, you're never going to do it. You're never going to get good at it because you hate it. Why the hell would you want to get good at it, right?
So for me, my personal opinion on why I think jiu-jitsu is one of the more complete martial arts and why I think it's probably one of the better options for somebody if they're looking for a self-defense option or something. So it's no secret, talked about it on the show multiple times. I grew up as a kid with cerebral palsy. And if you look at me, obviously, I was a small kid when I was younger. Granted, I had already boxed before I ever went to try jiu-jitsu. But to me, jiu-jitsu is so much more of a applicable self-defense technique because in boxing, I mean, let's face it. If you know how to fight, yeah, you can make a guy look stupid. But at the end of the day, if I'm fighting a guy who's 250 pounds and all muscle, and yeah, I can hit him 5-6 times, but if he hits me one good time, guess what? I'm going to sleep, and it don't matter how good you are. Now, I've had it happen not only, and it's not something I'm proud of by any means, but at the same time, you know, I've been in street fights before where when they're on the feet, people are super confident. But it's funny. As soon as they go to the ground, it's like a fish out of water. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not maybe the most seasoned jiu-jitsu practitioner, if you know what you're doing, you go against a Joe Blow on the street, you can then control them in a way where you can stay safe. You're not doing a ton of damage to where you're going to, you know, risk, you know, going to jail for really doing some serious damage or whatever. And for me, I am most thankful for jiu-jitsu because I've been able to use it to help some of the kids with disabilities that I work with. Mm-hmm. You know, the flexibility that you get from jiu-jitsu, the dexterity you get because of the different movements there are, having to figure out what works for your game, because not what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for the next guy. So that, to me, I think is the best part when it comes to jiu-jitsu, because anybody can do it. Yeah. Where I don't think anybody can box, or I don't think anybody can do MMA, because some people, like you said, just don't like getting hit. And if you don't like getting hit, clearly neither one of those sports is going to work.
Right, right. And not everybody can take hits like that and be okay in their life.
And keep going.
And keep going. Well, you know, not even just like they can't take the hits because they'll, you know, be knocked out. But like, I mean, if you're a professional in your field, you can't you can't go to work with black eyes and bloody lips and a busted nose, and you know you can't sit, you know what I mean? Like your ribs are all jacked up because somebody was using you as a body, you know, a punching bag. It's jiu-jitsu. You can hide the injuries; they're inside your body. You know what I mean? Like you don't. And
really, you can work around them.
And you can work around them, right? So, in that way, yeah, I think you're 100% right. You know,
Dev, what about you? Any questions? Any thoughts on what we're talking about?
Well, kind of on the same line of self-defense, man, for women who, you know, are looking for a way to, you know, defend themselves, you know, in case something happens. What's the benefits of jiu-jitsu for women in particular?
Well, I mean, for women, you know, typically the women who are, you know, if they're in a self-defense situation, they're typically going to be smaller, right? Possibly weaker. So the technique that you learn in jiu-jitsu to be able to, the leverage that you can use your body against somebody else is very important, right? The thing that we do in jiu-jitsu from day one is figure out how to use leverage and not necessarily our strength or our speed or even our flexibility against somebody else. We're trying to use our leverage, how we can use our body against somebody else's, even if we're smaller. And so that by itself is that's the important thing here. Now there are specific techniques that work really well in certain scenarios, and you know, typically the way the women are built, they work really well for them, like triangle chokes and all these different things. But really, at the end of the day, women doing jiu-jitsu are going to be a lot more confident when somebody puts hands on them. It's just the way it is.
Dude, I've tried to get my sister to do it for years. Like, she had a guy like followed her out of work and things like that. And like, dude, I have been hell bent on trying to get her to train to some degree, just enough so that she knew what she was doing. And like, I couldn't agree more. I think jiu-jitsu is, like I said, again, that goes back to what I was saying with it being applicable for everybody. Since we're talking about chokes, let's talk about your bread and butter and my favorite choke, the guillotine. Tell me about how that's become, like, you've got your own system with it at this point. And Dev, here's another nugget for you. You remember when I told you I was training for Michigan Open, the one that you came out to come watch me compete in? This is the guy I told you I went to go train with to work on the guillotine a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear about this.
So tell me your thoughts on, for you, why would you say the guillotine is your favorite submission, first of all, and what got you to where you've, you know, because now the way you were showing me that you're doing your guillotine is way different than the way I originally was taught how to do it. And I loved it from jump because, like you said, you've got to find out what works for you for jiu-jitsu. For me, I'm not the most flexible guy, so triangles have never been my thing. Mm. But if I could get a hold of anything, whether it was an arm triangle, a darce, a Kimura, anything that I could squeeze with my upper body, I could do well. So that's why I naturally liked guillotine. So what was it for you? And would you say that's your favorite submission? If not, what is?
Well, it's actually not my favorite submission, but that doesn't mean it's not one of my favorites, right? I have some submissions that I like better, probably only because they feel nicer. You know what I mean? I guess I've been doing the guillotine for so long that I've gotten bored of it over the times, and because I've been pretty successful with it over the course of me being a blue belt all the way to being a black belt. That's something I gravitate towards other things, but I continue to sharpen it. So it is one of my favorites. Not my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. Now, the guillotine thing was actually kind of funny how this became one of my more successful techniques. Back when we were training at MASH. Big Don was our main instructor, right? He was the
past guest of the show, Big Don.
Yeah, Big Don. Shout out to Big Don. He was the guy who was teaching 95% of the classes at MASH at the time.
Pretty much. I would definitely say that.
Right.
That's a good bet.
It was him and then Toth at the time that I'm talking about when I was a white belt. Now, Don told me, or he told somebody else. I don't remember if he told me specifically or told somebody else, don't do guillotines. Don't do guillotines. Don't do guillotines. And what I thought he meant by that was, don't do them now as a white belt, because I think he did explain it like, you're just gonna fall back and you're gonna mess it up and you're not gonna be good at anything else because you're just gonna keep falling back for guillotines. Kind of like a lot of instructors say about the straight ankle lock. Don't work on that right now. Like, it's good to know. It's a good technique.
That happens to be another one I happen to be good at.
Right. But don't do it right now. So I didn't touch a guillotine, arm in, no arm, on top, on bottom, until I got my blue belt. I remember like the first day training after I got my blue belt, I started attempting them and working on them, and I was trash. I mean, I wasn't any good. I didn't know how to do it. I never did them, right? So I started working on them, and then over the course of time, it somehow became a little bit more successful for me just through practice and whatever. And then I watched Marcelo Garcia do his high elbow guillotine, right? The Marcelo team, people call it.
Yep.
And I started seeing that, and so I started kind of like a little bit playing around with it. And then it was in 2009, I believe, that I went to. It was in 2009 that I went to Miguel Torres's gym to train.
Okay.
And
I remember him from WEC back in the day. For those of you who don't recognize him, Devin, do you remember watching Miguel Torres at all?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the pound for pound best fighters
in
the
WEC.
world.
He was the man, especially because they were the ones that had the first ones to have like the small weight classes. Like, his fights back then were always fun to watch.
Oh yeah, he was an animal. I mean, he by the way, one of the nicest guys in martial arts ever. The guy let me stay at his house for free. Like, I was a blue belt. I wasn't anybody. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, you should come train at my gym. So I'm like, okay, I'll come over there. I can't wait for a week. Let me train for free. All these different things. Well, that's a different story. But he started showing me his version of the Marcelo style guillotine, and then right after that, things clicked in my head, and I started hitting it in tournaments, and then I just started building off of it. And then I was a blue belt in 2009. I've been doing it for 10 years. You know what I mean?
I get you.
Eventually, I evolved it to be what it is now, and some of the elements are the same from what Marcelo was doing and what Miguel was doing, and some of them are completely different. It's not a guillotine. Like, we call it a guillotine. It's not a guillotine. It's a front naked strangle.
Well, I was going to say, because when I went to train with you to get ready for the Michigan Open, like, I had always been taught to keep your head, pressed to their back. That part I knew. Mm-hmm. But the way you did it was so different, because you were teaching to, cup the chin and then to continue to go around them as you choked them. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm looking like, dude, at first when I watched you do it, I'm like, well, doesn't that kind of like give away the position at that point, the farther you go around, until I started to try it. Mm-hmm. And then once I learned it, like, again, for me, like I said, my upper body is my strength. So I then would use that. And then if it didn't work, it also helped transition into an arm triangle. You could go from an arm triangle to a darce. You could you could literally go from move to move to move. So like the way you did it opened up more doors for me as far as to like different transitions and things. But yeah, I had never seen somebody do it that way. And like, I guess my question with that is, what is it about the way that you do the guillotine that you feel makes it most effective for you, because you don't really see a lot of guys doing that to where they crank around. It's usually, like you said, they'll stay right there, or they'll keep their head pinned against the back or something like that, where you're kind of going around them as you're choking them.
So what I think a lot of people do, and were originally taught, they're taught to lift their wrist and lower forearm into the windpipe. Now, they may not say that's what you're supposed to do, but that's how they show it. And that's how people learn it. That's how everybody's learned it. Like,
that's how I learned it first.
And this is, I'm not shitting on anybody here. You know what I mean? This is the way that we were all taught. And this is how our instructors were taught. This is how their instructors were taught. It's just, this is the way it was done for a long time. And that could be effective sometimes. But you use a lot of bicep.
Yeah, you
energy.
squeeze yourself
You're
out.
Squeezing yourself out. I mean, I'm exhausted after I do. I can't do guillotines that way. I don't have enough cardio for that. So, I've never been a guy who does cardio. Like, there were guys like, in the gym like Fisher.
Oh yeah.
And these guys who were like super athletic, and they go forever, but they worked really hard to go forever. It wasn't like they just naturally were like that.
Yeah.
They worked really hard. I don't like working that hard. I don't. I mean, like, I work consistently and as efficiently as I can. That's the only reason that I'm any good at jiu-jitsu, if I am. It's not because I work really, 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 really hard all the time. It's because I just keep doing it forever, right? Or as, 11 years later, forever, right? So going around, I'm creating an angle on my opponents that I don't need to squeeze. It's my movement that's putting the pressure on them. And the very end of the technique, and I think you probably remember this, at the very end, when you're at the very end of your turn, that's when you squeeze. And you squeeze for that long.
Right.
It's over.
And that's the thing. Like, it was totally different from the way I originally remember learning it. And like I said, which further... Shit, I went for it in every match I had in that tournament. But
yeah.
I mean, like I said, that was the first time I'd seen it that way. Like I say, little variations. Everybody's got their own way of doing things.
For sure.
As we start to wind down here, you got Modern Flow that's happening November 17th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about some of the names that you've got in there. One last time, let everybody know when, where, how much it's going to be to get in. And again, what makes Modern Flow Pro so much different than your run-of-the-mill JITS tournaments?
So Modern Flow Pro 2, it's going to be at Assembly Jiu-Jitsu on November 17th at 5 p.m. Okay, doors will open at 4 o'clock. Tickets, you can get them. If you guys have teammates or your coach is competing, you can buy tickets from them. If you don't, you can buy them from us at the door. If we have them available, I'm fairly sure we're going to sell out because it's going to be at Assembly, right? We're only going to have enough tickets. We only have 220 tickets, and half of them are gone already. So I recommend you talk to your coaches and your teammates if they have them. If you don't have everybody that that's competing, you can buy them on our website. They're $55 if you want them to get them shipped. They're $50 to you if you buy them from your teammates and all that stuff. And if you come to the door, they'll be $50. But I definitely recommend you get them ahead of time because 100%. We're going to be at capacity. Like, we're going to be above capacity for sure. And I would hate to turn you guys away. I will stuff you in if I can, but I don't want to turn you guys away. So if you really want to come, please get them ahead of time. It's going to be the best grappling experience here in Michigan, without a doubt. We have some really incredible lighting and seating and all of this different stuff to make this the best event possible. It's gonna be it's not something that you've seen here. Other people
would you say it's something on par with like what you saw at the On It Invitational, something like that?
Yeah, I think it'll be like that. It'll probably be a little bit nicer as far as certain things are concerned. The On It Invitational was amazing. It was really cool. They had a great venue.
I watched that as you competed.
Yeah, no, it was a great venue. All that stuff was great. We're going to have a little bit more seating. We're not going to be people are going to be sitting in chairs as opposed to bleachers, so it'll be a little bit more comfortable. We have more space in our gym than On Invitational had. It will be live streamed as well. We're figuring out the whole live streaming platform, but that will all be on our website and our Facebook, social media, all that stuff.
Make sure you get it to me. I'll also share it off of ko3cpod.com, Knockouts and 3 Counts podcast on Facebook, all that good stuff.
Yeah, beautiful. But I really like, guys, I want to, leave you guys with one point here. It's like, my goal originally was to be the best competitor that I could possibly be, and that I always thought that would be one of the best in the world. Now my goals are shifting. That's still important to me, but I want to bring the best grappling to Michigan possible. And it starts with our local competitors getting as good as they can. And, not everybody has dreams of being a world champion. Not everybody has dreams of doing jiu-jitsu for the rest of their life. But there are going to be a lot of people who come after us. And we need to be those guys that they lean on, right? Just like me and you, we came up after these guys like Don and Brandon and all these guys and Danny and these guys, right? So, like, we need to pave the way for them. And then somebody else 10 years from now is going to do this way better than me. And that's what I hope for. That's what I'm hoping for. So we just need to step the game up. Everybody's got to step the game up a little bit more, every generation.
Dev, you got any last questions for our guest?
One last question. And Kyle, you and me had talked about this before. In the UFC, you got a guy named Ovince St. Preux, and he's kind of gotten known for doing the Von Flue choke. And one thing that I've never understood is, how does that choke happen?
I explained it to you because I've choked somebody in it.
I know, but I want to hear from Garmo. How does that happen? Is it just someone not knowing what they're doing and basically falling into it, or is it that Ovince St. Preux is just so good at it that he knows how to set people up to fall into it?
Both. If people are a little bit stubborn, people think that they can guillotine him, or
they're tired.
Yeah, plus they're tired. People think that they can keep him in a front headlock and get the better of him, but he's been doing this technique for however long he's been doing it. Who knows? He could.
And he's finished it multiple times at the highest level you can.
The Von Flue choke is 100% a legit technique. 100% legit. I mean, it's an amazing technique, but typically,
it's not something you should get caught in if you're.
Yeah, there's a very easy defense. Let go.
Right.
But when you let go, you end up in bottom side. So, like, people think they can use it to turn their opponent over, especially in MMA, because nobody wants to be in bottom side in MMA.
Of course.
So I understand why it happens. It is kind of funny that he's gotten it so many times.
And in the UFC of all places. Yeah, it's not like we're talking about amateur fights.
The more impressive thing is that one Russian guy, that Ukrainian guy who gets the people in the bottom, Ezekiel. Mm-hmm. That I still don't understand how he's able to finish people like that. I've never really saw that joke break down, but
they're telling us it's time to go home. So before we get out of here, Garmo, let them know where they can find you and where they can find your gym as well.
All right, guys, you can follow us on at Assembly Jiu-Jitsu on Instagram. We're located in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. So if you guys want to come visit one of the most beautiful facilities you ever see, please come visit us. Everybody's welcome from any school. And you can follow me personally at GarmoFlow AJJ on Instagram.
Dev, throw out your social medias real quick.
You can find me on Twitter at Devin63. That's DEVINTHE63. You can find me on Instagram at All Steak No Sizzle. Make sure you're doing the Reality Era News page on Facebook where we talk wrestling in there.
And last but not least, before we get out of here, shout out to last week's guest, Mega Ran, who's going to be here at Kobo this Saturday. Knockouts and 3 Counts will be in the building. So if you come down to UMaCon to come check out the show, we'll be there. Check them out. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Detroit Knockout, at Detroit NOKOUT. Make sure you're following the show at Knockouts and 3 Counts Podcast on Facebook. Obviously, if you're watching, you know that. And I already know where Randy's going. Shout out to Punch Deck.
Yeah, our intro song is More, More, More by Punch Deck.
So, yeah, make sure you're following us on all our social medias. Also, guys, make sure you go and subscribe. All of our episodes are on YouTube as well at Knockouts and 3 Counts, and we're available pretty much everywhere you can get your podcasts. You can find us Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. I mean, pretty much anywhere you look to find your podcast, you can find us. Also, make sure that if you're going to be in Baltimore for StarCast, be on the lookout. Watch our social media because, as you saw, we had DDP, we had MJF, we had Nyla Rose, we had Dean Malenko, and more, and we're going to be there for StarCast 4, so who the hell knows what the hell is going to happen. And with all that said, fuck your couch. Peace.